When we talk about R.G. Carr Medical College, we are not talking about an ordinary institution. We are talking about a place that once stood as a symbol of medical excellence, a beacon of hope for millions, and a proud chapter in the history of India's healthcare. Established in 1916, this institution was the vision of Dr. Radha Gobinder Kaur, a pioneer who dreamed of an independent, self-reliant medical college free from colonial interference. Back then, this was more than just a college. It was a movement, a stand against oppression, and a promise to serve humanity with compassion and skill. For decades, R.G. Carr Medical College was celebrated as one of the top medical institutions in eastern India. It produced some of the most brilliant doctors, surgeons, and researchers the country had ever seen. The campus was a place of intellectual vibrancy, where innovation met ethics, and where the white coat truly symbolized honor and duty. In the hearts of patients and aspiring doctors, the name R.G. Carr inspired trust. It was a temple of healing, a place where lives were saved not just with medicine, but with humanity. But today, that glory feels like a distant memory. The bright light that once shone over this institution has been dimmed by shadows of mismanagement, corruption, and moral decay. The very foundation on which R.G. Carr stood, service, integrity, excellence, has been shaken. The institution that once set standards is now failing to meet even the basics, and the heartbreaking truth is the decline has not been slow and unnoticed. It has been rapid, public, and devastating. It is almost as if the walls of R.G. Carr have witnessed a transformation from a place of healing to a place of neglect. The lush campus that once echoed with the energy of dedicated students and grateful patients is now plagued by reports of administrative chaos, staff dissatisfaction, and a toxic environment, while the name R.G. Carr still carries historical weight. In recent years, it has been attached to scandals and controversies rather than groundbreaking achievements. How did this happen? How does an institution with over a century of legacy end up on the brink of disgrace? The answer is not simple. It lies in a chain of systemic failures. Somewhere along the way, priorities shifted. The focus on patient care, academic excellence, and innovation gave way to political influence, personal agendas, and unchecked power struggles. The very ethos that once made R.G. Carr stand out has been compromised in the pursuit of control and profit. Let us be very clear here. This is not just a sad story about one college's downfall. This is a betrayal of the trust that patients place in doctors, that parents place in educators, and that society places in institutions that are meant to protect life. When a medical college of such historic prestige fails, it is not only the current generation of students who suffer, it is the entire medical ecosystem that takes a hit. This decline is visible in every corner of the institution. In the once busy lecture halls, enthusiasm is being replaced by frustration. In the wards, where doctors once worked tirelessly to save lives, we now hear stories of shortages, negligence, and despair. The laboratories that should be buzzing with research and innovation are struggling to maintain even basic equipment. The administrative offices, instead of functioning as the backbone of the institution, are mired in confusion and inefficiency. It is painful to imagine what Dr. Radha Gobinder Kaur would feel if he were to walk through the halls of the college today. Would he recognize the institution he built with his dreams, sweat, and sacrifice? Or would he be heartbroken to see how far it has strayed from the ideals he fought for? But here's the dangerous part. When prestige fades and reputation crumbles, accountability disappears. People stop expecting high standards because they start accepting mediocrity as normal. And when mediocrity becomes normal in a medical college, it's not just reputations that are at stake, it's human lives. This is why we cannot talk about the dark reality of RG Carr without first acknowledging the tragic contrast between what it was and what it has become. The fall from grace is not just about mismanagement. It is about the erosion of values. It's about the transformation of a place of healing into a place where students fear harassment, where patients fear neglect, and where truth itself is suppressed. If we truly want to expose the dark reality, we must start by facing the painful truth. RG Carr's prestige is no longer its shield. It has become its disguise. For too long, the historical respect attached to its name has been used to hide present-day failures. Too many people still assume that because it was once great, it must still be great. That illusion is dangerous. It protects the wrongdoers and prevents reform. As we move forward in this speech, you will hear about the corruption that has taken root, the harassment faced by students and staff, the declining patient care that is costing lives, and the attempts to silence those who speak out. These are not isolated problems. They are symptoms of a deeper illness that began when the institution stopped honoring its founding principles. RG Carr Medical College was built to be a sanctuary for healing and learning. Today, it stands as a cautionary tale, a reminder that no legacy, no matter how glorious, can survive without integrity and accountability. And unless something changes, unless we act, we will not just be mourning the fall of a college, we will be witnessing the death of an ideal. If the loss of RG Carr's historical prestige is the visible crack in the wall, then administrative corruption and mismanagement are the termites eating away at its very foundations. This is not just a matter of inefficiency. It is a deep-rooted, systemic decay that thrives on political influence, favoritism, and a shocking lack of accountability. The administration of RG Carr Medical College is supposed to be the engine that drives the institution, ensuring that classes run on time, resources are allocated fairly, patients receive proper treatment, and the campus remains a safe space for learning and healing. But what happens when the engine itself is corrupt? What happens when the very people entrusted to safeguard the college's mission start prioritizing their personal gain over public duty? For years now, whispers of bribery, embezzlement, and misuse of funds have circulated among students, staff, and even patients. Funds allocated for upgrading equipment or improving infrastructure have allegedly vanished without a trace. Reports suggest that contracts for maintenance, canteen services, and even essential medical supplies often go to favored contractors, not because they offer the best quality or price, but because they have the right political connections or personal ties to the decision makers. This favoritism doesn't just waste money, it costs lives. Imagine a hospital ward running out of essential medicines, not because the budget wasn't there, but because someone decided to award a supply contract to an incompetent vendor. Imagine critical medical equipment lying broken for months because repairs are stuck in paperwork, while funds quietly shift into private pockets. In a medical setting, such negligence is not just corruption, it is criminal negligence. Political interference has also seeped into administrative appointments. Leadership roles are too often filled not by merit, but by loyalty to certain factions. When leadership is chosen for political convenience rather than competence, the focus shifts from solving problems to covering them up. And in RG Carr's case, this has created an environment where genuine grievances are ignored, while those who dare to raise their voice are branded as troublemakers. Even day-to-day administration suffers. Decisions that should be quick and practical, like approving urgent purchases or addressing safety issues, are bogged down by unnecessary bureaucracy. At the same time, decisions that benefit select individuals move at lightning speed. This selective urgency is a clear sign of manipulation from the top. The impact on students is particularly devastating. Young medical professionals enter RG full of dreams and determination, but soon find themselves trapped in a system where academic priorities are often sacrificed for administrative convenience. Requests for better laboratory resources, updated study material, or even basic maintenance of classrooms are delayed indefinitely. Instead of focusing on learning how to save lives, students waste time navigating red tape, writing repeated applications, and sometimes even pleading for the most basic necessities. For the patients who rely on this institution, mismanagement is not just frustrating, it's life-threatening. From delayed surgeries due to equipment shortages to unhygienic wards caused by poor maintenance contracts, the failures of the administration directly harm the people they are meant to protect. And the cruel irony is that when mistakes happen, blame is almost always shifted onto the doctors or nurses, while the root cause, the administrative rot, remains untouched. We must also talk about the lack of transparency. RGCA's administration operates like a closed-door club where decisions are made in secrecy and records are kept vague. Public access to budget breakdowns, audit reports, and internal inquiry results is minimal, making it nearly impossible for outsiders to hold them accountable. This secrecy is deliberate because transparency is the enemy of corruption, and when someone does try to shine a light on these practices, the response is swift and brutal. Whistleblowers, whether they are staff members, students, or even external auditors, often face harassment, transfers, or false accusations. This culture of intimidation ensures that the corruption machine keeps running smoothly, free from interference by truth seekers. We must understand the psychological impact of this environment. When corruption becomes normalized, people stop fighting it. Students learn to keep their heads down to avoid trouble. Doctors become resigned to working with broken systems because complaining leads nowhere. Even patients begin to expect substandard treatment, assuming that this is just how things are. This acceptance is dangerous because it allows the cycle to continue unchecked. But the truth is, corruption and mismanagement in a medical institution like RGCAR are not abstract problems. They are direct threats to human life. Every delayed purchase order for critical drugs, every appointment made for political convenience, every rupee siphoned from the hospital's budget, it all translates into suffering, loss, and avoidable deaths. The saddest part is that it doesn't have to be this way. With competent, ethical leadership, transparent financial practices, and a genuine commitment to public service, RGCAR could easily reclaim its lost glory. But until the administrative rot is addressed, no amount of student dedication or doctor skill will be enough to save the institution. So as we pull back the curtain on RGCAR's dark reality, let's be clear. The crisis here is not just a result of medical challenges. It is the product of deliberate choices. Choices made by people who valued power over service, personal profit over human lives. And unless those choices are exposed, challenged, and punished, the downward spiral will continue. In the next part of this speech, we will confront an equally disturbing reality: how the same toxic system that mismanages resources also exploits and harasses the very people who keep the institution alive. Because in RGCAR's current state, corruption doesn't just waste money, it destroys lives from the inside out. If corruption and mismanagement are the forces draining RGCAR Medical College from the top, then the exploitation and harassment of students and staff are the wounds bleeding it from within. The most heartbreaking truth is that the people who should be nurtured, protected, and empowered here The medical students, junior doctors, nurses, and honest faculty are often the ones suffering the most under this toxic system. Let's start with the medical students, the lifeblood of any teaching hospital. They enter RG-CAR with dreams of serving humanity, ready to endure sleepless nights, grueling study hours, and the immense emotional weight of dealing with life and death. But instead of being guided and mentored, too many of them find themselves bullied, belittled, and broken by a culture of harassment that has been allowed to fester unchecked. Ragging, that outdated, dangerous practice that should have been eradicated decades ago, still lurks in the shadows here. For some, it's not just about harmless pranks or initiation rituals. It becomes psychological warfare. First-year students have reported instances of verbal abuse, humiliation, and even being forced into menial or degrading tasks by seniors. The trauma from such experiences doesn't fade easily. It stays, silently eating away at confidence and mental health, and the pressure doesn't stop after the first year. Junior doctors and interns, already exhausted by relentless shifts, are often treated as disposable labor rather than future medical leaders. Instead of being given fair workloads and proper training, they are overburdened with tasks that have little to do with learning medicine. Endless paperwork, menial errands for senior staff, and unreasonable working hours without adequate breaks become their daily reality. And when they dare to complain, they are often labeled as unprofessional or weak, their concerns dismissed outright. This isn't just about physical exhaustion, it's about mental and emotional exploitation. Depression, anxiety, and burnout are alarmingly common among the young professionals at RG-CAR, yet mental health support is virtually non-existent. Students and staff struggling to cope are often told to toughen up or deal with it, perpetuating a cycle where silence is seen as strength and speaking up is punished. The power imbalance in the institution makes matters worse. Senior faculty or administrators accused of harassment are rarely held accountable. Complaints are buried under bureaucratic procedures or quietly resolved behind closed doors, almost always in favor of the more powerful party. For victims, the message is clear: you can't win against the system, so you might as well stay quiet. It's not just students who suffer. Many nurses, paramedical staff, and even young doctors face bullying, intimidation, and unfair treatment. Promotions can be denied for arbitrary reasons, leave requests ignored, and professional growth opportunities withheld unless one has the right political backing or personal connections. Those who resist unethical practices or refuse to bow to corrupt demands often find themselves targeted, assigned the toughest shifts, given impossible workloads, or transferred to undesirable postings. One of the most disturbing aspects is the sexual harassment cases that have surfaced in recent years. While some have made it to the media, many remain hidden, buried under fear and stigma. Victims are pressured to remain silent, warned that going public will ruin their career or damage the reputation of the institution. This twisted logic protects the abusers and further entrenches the toxic culture. And let's be clear, when an institution that trains doctors fails to protect its own people, it sends a chilling message about how it values human dignity. If those inside the system are treated as expendable, what hope is there for the patients who depend on them? The exploitation also extends to financial aspects. Some students face unnecessary delays in receiving stipends or scholarships, forcing them into financial strain. Others are pressured into paying for unofficial fees or expenses to secure resources or opportunities that should be freely available. This is not just unfair, it's predatory. The emotional toll of all this cannot be overstated. Imagine working 36-hour shifts with minimal rest, dealing with critically ill patients, and then returning to an environment where you're not respected or supported. Imagine trying to focus on saving lives while constantly looking over your shoulder, fearing retaliation for speaking the truth. That's the day-to-day reality for many in RGCAR today. This culture of exploitation and harassment is not accidental. It's a byproduct of the same corruption and mismanagement we discussed earlier. When leaders protect themselves instead of their people, abuse of power becomes inevitable. And when abuse becomes normalized, it spreads, infecting every level of the institution like a disease. We must also understand that this is not just an internal problem. The ripple effects reach the public. Overworked, mentally drained, and demoralized staff cannot perform at their best. Patients feel the difference in their care. Delays, mistakes, and a lack of empathy often stem not from incompetence, but from sheer human exhaustion and despair. The dark reality is this: RGCAR Medical College cannot heal others while it is silently breaking its own healers. You cannot expect compassion from those who are denied compassion themselves. You cannot demand excellence from those crushed under the weight of systemic abuse. In the next part of this speech, we will examine how these internal crises spill over into the most devastating consequence of all: declining patient care and dangerous medical practices. Because when an institution fails its own people, it inevitably fails the public it is sworn to serve. When an institution mistreats its own people, the consequences are not confined to the campus walls. They spill out into the wards, operating theaters, and emergency rooms. At RGCAR Medical College, the result has been a sharp decline in patient care and, in some cases, the adoption of dangerous medical practices that put lives at risk. This is not an exaggeration. This is not a distant possibility. It is a reality witnessed by patients, families, and even doctors who are brave enough to speak off the record. The decay we have discussed so far, corruption, mismanagement, and exploitation, ultimately manifests where it hurts the most, in the quality of care provided to those who come seeking help. Let's start with infrastructure. The wards that once held promise now show signs of neglect. Peeling paint, broken beds, dirty floors, and overcrowded conditions that violate basic hygiene standards. Patients often have to share beds or lie on the floor, especially during peak seasons of illness. In such conditions, cross-infection is not a risk, it's a certainty. For a hospital of RGCAR's stature, this is not just unacceptable, it is disgraceful. Then there's the issue of equipment and supplies. Stories abound of life, saving machines lying out of order for months because repair contracts are stuck in administrative limbo, or worse, because funds earmarked for maintenance have been quietly diverted elsewhere. Oxygen supply systems that should be regularly tested are left unchecked until a crisis occurs. Even basic necessities like sterile gloves, syringes, and Roman IV fluids are sometimes in short supply, forcing doctors to improvise or delay treatment. In medicine, delays can mean the difference between life and death. And let's not forget the shortage of medicines. Patients are often handed long lists of drugs and told to purchase them from outside pharmacies because the hospital stock is depleted. This not only adds financial strain to already vulnerable families, but also wastes precious time when every second counts. Imagine a critically ill patient's family scrambling across the city in the middle of the night to find a medicine that should have been readily available inside the hospital. This is not care. It is cruelty disguised as inevitability. The human resources crisis compounds the problem. Overworked junior doctors and nurses, already stretched thin by unreasonable demands, are tasked with handling an overwhelming number of patients. A doctor who is on their 30th straight hour without rest cannot be expected to perform at peak efficiency, no matter how dedicated they are. Exhaustion breeds mistakes, and in a hospital, mistakes can be fatal. Reports have surfaced of avoidable death of patients who did not receive timely intervention because the emergency room was overcrowded, or because the right specialist was unavailable, or because diagnostic tests were delayed for hours, sometimes days. These are not rare tragedies, they are becoming disturbingly common, and the most chilling part, they are often quietly brushed under the rug, attributed to unfortunate circumstances, instead of acknowledged as systemic failures. The training environment is also suffering, which directly affects patient safety. Medical students and junior doctors are supposed to learn under close supervision, but with senior staff either overburdened, disengaged, or busy navigating political games, oversight is inconsistent at best. In some cases, students are forced to handle complex cases far beyond their current level of training without adequate guidance. This not only endangers patients, but also robs young doctors of the structured learning they need to develop into competent professionals. Then there are the questionable medical practices that arise in such an environment. Cutting corners becomes a survival tactic. Sterilization procedures are skipped to save time. Outdated protocols are followed because no one has bothered to update them, and rushed decision-making replaces thorough diagnosis. In a place where speed is prioritized over accuracy, patient welfare becomes a casualty. It is also important to mention the attitude shift that such conditions create. For many staff members, the constant struggle against shortages, overwork, and administrative hostility leads to burnout and emotional detachment. Patients become numbers, not people. Complaints are brushed aside, empathy erodes, and the once sacred doctor-patient relationship begins to break down. This erosion of compassion is perhaps the most tragic consequence of all, because it strikes at the heart of what medicine is meant to be. The public perception of R.G. Carr is shifting accordingly. Once a name that inspired trust, it is now whispered with disappointment and frustration among patients who feel abandoned by a system that promised to heal them. Families speak of long waits, indifferent staff, and being left in the dark about their loved one's condition. Many choose to avoid the hospital altogether, seeking treatment in smaller, private clinics despite the higher cost, because at least there they feel seen and heard. And yet, despite all this, there are still pockets of heroism, dedicated doctors, nurses, and students who push through impossible circumstances to save lives. But their efforts are constantly undermined by the larger systemic rot. A doctor cannot do their best work when they lack the tools, the support, and the basic institutional will to prioritize patient care above all else. This is why the crisis at R.G. Carr is not just an internal matter. It is a public health emergency. When a hospital of this scale and reputation fails to provide safe, effective care, the consequences ripple far beyond its walls. It undermines trust in the healthcare system as a whole and puts countless lives at risk. In the next part of this speech, we will confront another uncomfortable truth: the deliberate silencing of whistleblowers, those who try to raise the alarm about these dangerous conditions, only to be met with intimidation and retaliation. Because in R.G. Carr's current reality, speaking the truth can cost you your career, your reputation, and in some cases, even your safety. If there is one thing that can turn the tide against corruption, exploitation, and dangerous practices, it is the courage of those who speak out. Whistleblowers, whether they are doctors, students, nurses, or administrative staff, are the last line of defense in a failing system. They are the ones who take the risk to expose the truth, not for personal gain, but because they believe the public has a right to know. But in R.G. Carr Medical College's current reality, speaking out is not seen as an act of integrity. It is treated as an act of betrayal. And the system reacts not by fixing the problem, but by crushing the person who dared to reveal it. This is perhaps the most chilling element of the dark reality we are exposing today, because when an institution punishes truth, tellers instead of wrongdoers, it sends a very clear message: silence is safety and honesty is suicide. Consider what happens when a student reports harassment, corruption, or negligence. Instead of receiving support or protection, they are often branded as troublemakers. Suddenly, their academic record is under scrutiny. They may find themselves being failed in practical exams for petty reasons, denied important rotations, or even threatened with expulsion. Some are subtly warned that their future career in medicine could be ruined if they persist. The pressure is not always overt. It can be a series of small, calculated acts designed to wear a person down until they stop fighting. The same applies to junior doctors and staff. Those who challenge dangerous practices, like skipping sterilization protocols or using expired medicines, are often accused of insubordination. Transfers to undesirable postings become a common punishment. Shift schedules are manipulated to overwork them as a form of retaliation. Some have even faced false complaints lodged against them, creating a legal and professional nightmare that distracts them from their real work. And if a case gains traction in the media, the response is swift: damage control mode. Statements are issued denying all allegations, branding them as politically motivated or false propaganda. Behind the scenes, the whistleblower is often isolated, their colleagues warned not to associate with them. It's a textbook example of institutional gaslighting: discredit the source, deny the problem, and hope it all blows over. There are documented instances of press intimidation as well. Journalists who try to investigate reports from inside RG Carr often face stonewalling. Requests for interviews are ignored, access to records is denied, and sometimes subtle warnings are sent through unofficial channels to drop the story. Those who persist risk being barred from hospital premises or facing defamation suits. The goal is simple: keep the story contained, no matter how much truth there is behind it. This culture of fear doesn't just silence current whistleblowers, it prevents new ones from emerging. Students learn early on that it's safer to ignore wrongdoing than to challenge it. Doctors internalize the idea that their career and family security depend on keeping their head down. Even patients who experience mistreatment sometimes avoid filing complaints, convinced it will lead nowhere or might even result in worse care for their loved ones. The psychological impact is profound. People begin to normalize what should be unacceptable. Overcrowded wards, that's just how it is. Missing medicines, that's routine. Harassment, don't talk about it, it will only cause trouble. This normalization is exactly what the corrupt elements in the system want. It allows them to operate freely without scrutiny. But here's the dangerous paradox: by silencing whistleblowers, the institution is not protecting its reputation. It's destroying it in the long run. Because when the truth finally comes out, as it inevitably does, the public doesn't just see the original wrongdoing, they see the cover-up. And in the eyes of the public, the cover-up is often worse than the crime itself. It is important to note that whistleblowing is not an act of hostility. It is an act of loyalty to the ideals the institution was built on. The individuals who speak out are not trying to destroy RG Carr, they are trying to save it. They are the ones still clinging to the belief that the college can live up to its founding principles if the rot is removed. Silencing them is not only unjust, it is self-destructive. There are global examples of medical institutions that have turned crises around precisely because they listened to internal critics. Protecting whistleblowers, creating anonymous reporting systems, and ensuring independent investigations are not signs of weakness. They are signs of moral strength. Sadly, RG Carr has chosen the opposite path, prioritizing image over integrity. And here's the harsh truth. A hospital that punishes honesty is a hospital where patients are not safe. Because if a doctor or nurse sees something that could harm a patient, but fears retaliation for reporting it, that harm will go unaddressed. The silence becomes complicity, and complicity costs lives. This is why the battle for whistleblower protection at RG is not just about fairness, it's about public safety. It's about creating an environment where problems are surfaced quickly, not buried until they explode into tragedy. It's about making sure the first instinct of anyone who sees wrongdoing is to speak, not to hide. In the next part of this speech, we will reach the point where all these threads, corruption, exploitation, declining care, and silenced truth, come together in a final and urgent demand: accountability and reform. Because if RG is to have any hope of reclaiming its legacy, the change must be systemic, swift, and uncompromising. We have now walked through every layer of RG Medical College's dark reality: its fall from historical prestige, the rot of administrative corruption, the exploitation of its own people, the decline of patient care, and the deliberate silencing of those who try to tell the truth. And as heavy as this truth is, the story cannot end here, because exposing the darkness is only the first step. Demanding change is the next. The problems at RG are not isolated mistakes. They are symptoms of a systemic collapse in values, leadership, and accountability. This is not a matter of a few bad actors who can be replaced to fix things. This is about dismantling an entire culture of impunity that has been allowed to grow unchecked for years. Accountability must start at the top. Those in positions of authority, whether administrators, department heads, or political backers, must be held responsible for their actions or their inaction. If funds have been misused, the money must be traced and recovered. If positions have been given through favoritism instead of merit, those appointments must be revoked. If harassment has been covered up, those complicit in the cover-up must face legal consequences. The institution must show that it values justice over protecting its own image. But accountability alone is not enough. We must have structural reform changes that make it impossible for the same problems to repeat themselves. This means independent investigations. Every allegation of corruption, harassment, or negligence must be investigated by an independent body, not by the same administration accused of wrongdoing. These findings must be made public. Transparent finances, hospital and college budgets, procurement contracts, and audit reports must be published regularly for public scrutiny. This removes the shadows where corruption hides. Whistleblower protection, a legally enforceable mechanism, must be put in place to protect those who speak out. Anonymous reporting systems, legal safeguards, and strict penalties for retaliation must become standard. Restoring medical standards, patient care must be placed at the center of every decision. This includes repairing infrastructure, maintaining equipment, ensuring 24/7 medicine availability, and keeping wards hygienic. Any failure to meet these standards must trigger immediate review and corrective action. Fair work environment, students, doctors, and nurses must be given safe, respectful, and supportive working conditions. Ragging and harassment should not just be prohibited on paper. They must be actively policed and punished. Merit-based leadership, senior positions should be filled through transparent, merit-based processes, not through political influence or personal connections. Competence, not loyalty, should decide leadership. These reforms are not optional. They are non-negotiable if RG is to be saved. Without them, any changes will be cosmetic at best, and the same cycle of abuse will begin again. We must also recognize that RG crisis is not just a local tragedy. It is a warning sign for the entire healthcare system. If a century-old institution with a proud legacy can be brought to its knees by corruption and neglect, so can others. That's why this fight is bigger than one college. It's about setting a precedent that no medical institution is above scrutiny and no life is expendable in the name of bureaucracy or politics. And make no mistake, reform will not come easily. The same forces that have thrived in this broken system will resist change with everything they have. They will try to discredit critics, stall investigations, and distract the public with empty promises. That is why public pressure is critical. The truth must not fade from headlines until action is taken. This is where you, the public, the media, the medical community, and the alumni of RGCAR come in. Speak out, demand transparency, support those inside the institution who are risking everything to push for reform. If you are a patient, refuse to accept substandard care as normal. If you are a journalist, keep digging until the full truth is laid bare. If you are a policymaker, make this the case that proves your commitment to public welfare is real, because silence is not neutrality, silence is complicity, and complicity is how institutions die. Imagine for a moment what RGCAR could be if the will for reform triumphed over the forces of decay. Imagine clean, well-equipped wards where patients receive timely, compassionate care. Imagine students learning in an environment that challenges and inspires them instead of breaking their spirit. Imagine administrators who see themselves as servants of the public good, not masters of a private empire. That vision is not impossible. It is exactly what RGCAR once was, and it can be again, but only if we stop pretending that the current reality is acceptable. We must remember, institutions do not heal themselves. They heal when people demand it. They heal when the truth is louder than the lies. They heal when justice is not a slogan but a practice. So let this be the moment we draw a line in the sand. Let this be the moment we say, no more. No more corruption disguised as management. No more exploitation disguised as tradition. No more neglect disguised as resource constraints. No more silencing of truth. Tellers in the name of protecting the institution. RGCAR Medical College has been a source of pride for over a century. It has saved countless lives, shaped countless careers, and stood as a monument to what Indian medicine can achieve, but its future depends on what we do now. Either we confront the dark reality head on, or we watch in silence as one of our greatest medical institutions collapses beyond repair. Choice is ours, the time is now, and history will remember which side we stood on.